So today we're going to talk about the one thing that makes a speaker go viral. And it's the same way with best-selling books. How come you've got all these authors today, they're self-publishing, the average is they're not selling any more than 200 books, even over a period of 5 years, whereas you've got books from hundreds of years ago that are still global bestsellers. You've got Think and Grow Rich. It has a very specific formula that made it a bestseller. And you have books like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and that's called a survival memoir. We still do these survival memoirs today at On Fire Books. We still craft survival memoir speeches on our TEDx stage or through Voices Speakers Bureau, and that's what we're talking about. What is a survival memoir? What makes it go viral? What can you do when you're crafting a talk or when you're editing your book that will make it go viral? It's not as simple as it sounds, because this is something that really requires a great amount of research and education, and specifically an education in reader psychology. So Viktor Frankl said in the book Man's Search for Meaning, which was about his experience as a doctor, right? Very highly esteemed, wealthy doctor in a concentration camp. So imagine that your town is invaded, which, you know, has happened throughout the course of history, and the wealthiest neighborhoods are invaded, the poor neighborhoods are invaded, people are taken hostage, and here's Viktor Frankl in this concentration camp, and he writes this book in his head about how you cannot control the tragedies that occur in your life, but what sets people apart is that you can control the way that you perceive and respond to it. And when he finally escaped the concentration camp after witnessing murders and death and destruction and horrible, horrible things, when he finally got out, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and he said that humans need a connection with the future. Not just the past, not just the present, but humans need a connection to the future in order to survive. And that's so powerful, and clearly this theme resonated with millions of people who purchased his book. It's a global bestseller today, long after he's gone, and he was recognized by the Library of Congress as one of the top authors in all of humanity, one of the top books ever sold. And that's because his message wasn't about his story. Millions of people have written about their story. His message wasn't, I survived in this concentration camp. His message was, I survived and you can too. And that, my friends, is the difference maker. And it's what most people are missing when they craft their talk. You know, I've just come off of 2 weeks editing multiple TED Talks, multiple speeches, preparing for this TEDx stage. And all of our speakers will tell you that the feedback and the coaching and the reviewing of the talks all pointed out the same consistent thing. As humans, we are wired to tell our story. So when we submit for an audition, we believe that the audience, the person hosting auditions, wants to hear our story. So when a video is required, or a resume, or the talk itself, what we do is we review it, we coach our speakers, but every speaker tends to just tell our story. But where 99.9% of people fail is in audience psychology. And that means it is not enough to tell our story. We must, in the beginning, before you tell your story, we must connect with the humanity, the heart, the mind, the soul, the whole holistic individual of your audience. If it's a reader, there's a specific way to do that through reader psychology by focusing only on the emotions of the individual reading your book. In fact, it's the same way with a speech or a TED Talk. You must close your eyes and you must envision your audience member as a thinking, breathing, worrying, filled with anxiety, perhaps uncertainty about the day, filled with thoughts about all of the things that they have to get done. And yet here they are listening to your talk or reading your book, and this human that is filled with emotions has a million things to do, and yet it's our challenge to break through that barrier and connect with the heart. And sometimes the way to do that is through the mind, because you can't really reach the heart through an immediate encounter. Sometimes you have to gain their trust, and often it's through the mind. However, there are ways to do this, but 99.9% of every TEDx speaker that has submitted talks or that gets on stage, they often forget that the story that you're telling isn't about you, that it is about the people receiving the story. Of course, we want to provide wisdom and value and knowledge and learning, but most importantly, we have to connect with the heart. So here's a real example of a speech, and I'm just going to get this out and read this to you right now. So someone sent me their TED Talk, and here's what they started with. You know, everyone says to me, "Hey, John, I really need your help." So that was the first sentence. Now, this may be a valid TED Talk because John goes in to talk about ways that he helps people, and I've changed the name from John. However, this is not a talk that tends to go viral because it's much better to start thinking about your listener. You don't want to alienate people. You want to draw them in. So it's much better starting out with something like this. Instead of talking about yourself, John should start his talk with a question. When was the last time you saw someone that you loved? Maybe it was this morning, maybe it was a week ago, maybe you haven't seen that friend or family member that you love in months. When you sat with that person that you loved, what was it about them that you loved? Because today we're going to talk about personality traits that strengthen relationships with loved ones. I'm John, and I'm here to talk to you about how you can strengthen your interpersonal relationships so that they're unbreakable. Now, that's just an example of how John, instead of talking about himself, could talk about the audience member and capture their heart. And by the time John's done talking, you know, I'm all in. I want to know, what can I do to strengthen my interpersonal relationships? So this is the secret that makes people have that it factor. You know, people that write songs that speak to your heart. Think of your favorite musician. It's really not just about the melody, it's about the lyrics. Think about somebody that wrote a song or a musician that sang a song that just spoke to your heart. Maybe every time you hear that song, you feel emotion. Maybe it's a sad song. Maybe it reminds you of someone. This is what we hope to achieve, this one thing that can make or break a TEDx audition, that can make or break an otherwise great memoir or book, that can take something from regular to best-selling in an instant. When I'm editing, whether it's a manuscript or whether I'm reviewing someone's speech, this is exactly what we look for. And usually it's just a few very critical tweaks that, we look at the material and we say, wow, this is great, but imagine if, like Viktor Frankl, or if, like Elie Wiesel, who wrote the book Night, you can come up with one statement that will resonate not just with 50% of your audience, but with all of humanity. Elie Wiesel said in the book Night that regardless of what kind of pain you went through, whether it's a breakup or the loss of someone you loved, or maybe even a rejection by a group of friends, maybe a divorce, whatever pain you've gone through, humans are all connected by pain. It's the one thing that makes us human. It's the one thing we will all experience. So when you think about a philosophical thought like that, this is what's missing from a good speech, but not a great one. It's what's missing from a good manuscript and book, but not a remarkable one. I hope that you've learned something today, my friends. Please think about reader and audience psychology as you go. And congratulations already, because you're ahead of the game just by listening to this podcast. Go ahead, take that advice and place it in your manuscripts. Really think about the philosophical meaning of life and not just the experience that you're delivering, whether it's a TED Talk on stage, whether it's a book, whether it's just a speech that you're giving at work. Think about the philosophical connection that your idea has to an individual's heart and to their hope for tomorrow. This is Tammy Kling with Voices Speakers Bureau.